This interview by the Free Press is an incredible example of great journalism, interviewing Douglas Murray, the esteemed Douglas Murray, on the Israel-Hamas war, Iran, all this stuff. The world's going to shit, World War III, mayhem all over the place. And the interviewer literally is shocked by what he's saying and the amount of truth that is spilling out of his mouth.
So the tide has turned. And the Israeli government and the Israeli armed forces and military have shown that there is a price to pay for trying to eradicate the Jewish people. And the price is being paid, and it's high, and it should always have been high, and it will probably get higher. This is a point of clarification. The Iranian Revolutionary Government used to enjoy sending rockets into Israel from Gaza using its proxy Hamas. Hamas is almost completely destroyed. Its cowardly leader, Yahya Sinwar, is hiding in a tunnel somewhere in the south of Gaza, surrounded by what he would regard as being the best hostages. That's his end. But his colleagues, his comrades, they've all gone. They've lost. They're in the dust of Gaza, and no one misses them. In the north, Hezbollah was meant to be the great army of the Tehran mullahs. In less than 2 weeks, Hezbollah has been utterly destroyed. First of all, 3,000 of their operatives had the misfortune, believing, as they may have been right to believe they couldn't trust their cell phones, decided to go to the old-fashioned pager devices. But someone, we don't know who, put explosives in all of those pager devices. And so 3,000 of their operatives in one moment across Lebanon and Syria all suffered grievous injury. The next day, their walkie-talkies blew up. By day 3, they couldn't trust to put on a kettle in Beirut. Then the senior membership of Hezbollah that still remained met in a building, and then they were struck. And then, best of all, when Benjamin Netanyahu came to New York last week, he went on stage to the UN. I watched from the gallery as the traditional walkout of various despots and dictators and their minions occurred. As he was doing it, somewhere in Beirut, Hassan Nasrallah was watching Benjamin Netanyahu on television. And that's when Hassan Nasrallah went to meet his maker.
It's like the baptism scene from The Godfather.
It's
It is.
I was told by a Jewish friend the other day that apparently there is something in Torah, in the Jewish tradition, that says that one should not take enormous delight in the decimation of one's foes. But I'm not Jewish. And so I don't have to follow this. Hassan Nasrallah and the other people who have just also gone to the dust have not just spent recent decades killing Israelis, kidnapping them from the border regions, firing rockets at people and communities across the north of Israel. They killed 241 American Marines in 1983, and they got away with it. They got away with it.
And so a lot of people don't know that. They attacked America's embassy. They attacked French and killed around 80 or so Frenchmen. And so Berger Macron, Biden, anyone American or French should be very anti-Hezbollah and very pro-Israel, destroying Hezbollah.
They killed French soldiers. They killed many other foreign nationals. They killed people. They kidnapped them. They got away with it. Not anymore. As Benjamin Netanyahu said when he spoke at Congress in July, he said, "This war is your war. Our fight is your fight, and our victory will be your victory." Now, that's Hezbollah, the organization formerly known as Hezbollah, or whatever we will have to call them. They've lost almost all of the ammunition they've stored up to fire at Israel all these decades. the United Nations was meant to oversee a resolution. I remember I was there in the war in 2006, and I remember the war finishing, and I remember the United Nations all calling for a ceasefire again. And all of the years afterwards, it turns out, lo and behold, you don't have to follow United Nations resolutions if you don't want to. And Hezbollah did not want to, and so they built up their rocket arsenal, and most of that has been destroyed in recent days. So that's Iran's proxy to the north. The Houthis in Yemen, everyone's favorite new terrorists, recently discovered by morons on American campuses, well, they're not doing too well either. Because it turns out that if you do the bidding of your paymasters in Tehran and you fire missiles at Israel, you'll be taken out too. So now is the point of clarification. The mullahs in Tehran do not any longer have active proxies able to try to destroy the Jewish state. They've gone in Gaza. They've gone in Lebanon, in the process of going. They're going in Yemen. So it's the mullahs versus Israel.
So what happens next? I mean, you are deeply, deeply sourced in Israel, and you've become somewhat close, I think, to the prime minister, who has said in sort of no uncertain terms, he's going after the mullahs next. He's also been saying that for a while. It's only now become more and more explicit. What do you think the next few weeks looks like, if you can share that?
Well, if I can't speak for the prime minister, but I would just say that it seems obvious that if Tehran is going to fire ballistic missiles at Israel, Israel has to be allowed to reply in kind.
He's referring to the ballistic missile attack that they recently fired, a couple of days ago. But at the time, it had not been fired yet. I think this interview was just prior to that, or even during that attack.
But the Israeli way of war is a way of war that is, of course, for them, it's existential. As Golda Meir famously said, we can't afford to lose once. And the mullahs have made their choice. Is it possible that they could be punished in a way that would be something which would topple the regime? Maybe. I don't know if Israel can do that alone or if America needs to do it with them.
Well, let's talk about America and its relationship to Israel in this moment. Because on the one hand, Joe Biden has declared he's a Zionist. America is still Israel's most important ally. It gives it tons of foreign aid. And we could go on and on and on if we wanted to make the case for this White House on that score. But on the other hand,
you can go on and on with bullshit, because at the end of the day, America's always been pro-Israel. So the idea that this specific administration is not totally, casting Israel aside is not so much of a groundbreaking issue. The problem is that they're claiming ceasefire now. They're not staying with them. And I think Douglas Murray is going to go into this more. But the main thing is they're not loyal. They're not loyal, and the West isn't loyal. And just like France is abandoning Israel, you have other countries like the United States hinting at abandoning Israel, regardless of the fact that it's the only democracy and the only Western nation serving Western purposes in the Middle East.
You can make a very different argument, which is you could argue that the roots of what we're seeing play out tonight over the skies of Israel goes back to the Obama administration and to an embrace of a sort of rapprochement with Iran. I wondered if you could sort of comment on that and whether the past 24 hours are kind of like
We all know that words have power. They set things in motion and make us
to market moment for that foreign policy worldview. Like, is that over? Has that been fully shattered and collapsed? Or are we still going to have to pretend as if, well, you tell me.
Well, Herb Stein's law, things that cannot go on won't. It's a law that economists are fond of. In foreign policy establishment, things that cannot go on usually do. There are two completely defunct paradigms which are still being pursued in Washington, Paris, and London. Number one, that if you give the Palestinians yet another state, by which I mean not being given a state in 2005 in Gaza isn't enough, and everything they've done since isn't enough. Let's give them another one, because maybe next time they won't decide to do a genocidal state again. First thing is this idea that Anthony Blinken said a couple of days after the 7th of October, this is why we need to double down on the two-state solution. What, you want another Palestinian state in order to become another terror state? And you reward them for the terror by giving them another state? That's delusion number one. Delusion number two is this idea.
Yeah, it's like, when they continuously say a Palestinian state will solve this. We've had multiple Palestinian states. You have Jordan, which is a Palestinian state. You have West Bank. You have Gaza. We tried Gaza. We left Gaza in 2005 in pursuit of peace. What happened? They attacked us multiple times. We had multiple wars. Then October 7th. We've had Palestinian autonomy. All it does is result in more Jewish people dying.
Yeah, that. And my gosh, the Obama administration was the worst at this, was this idea that you wait for the moderate reformer to appear under the mullahs in Tehran. Every single Iranian president in my lifetime who has come, every prime minister, every foreign minister, is always saying, the reformist. I mean, it's not even reformist in that, the hardliners are kill all the Jews and the reformists are kill most. It's not even that. It's that they don't come. The regime is set up in such a way they don't come. It was always a delusion of the Obama administration and others. You could coax the Ayatollahs to the table. They don't want to be at the table. If they wanted to be at the table, if they wanted to be this reformist thing, they wouldn't have set up this death trap in southern Lebanon, which, in my view, and the view of many others, was always there in order to get the opportunity of the mullahs to get atomic weaponry, genocidal weaponry to fire at the Jewish state, and to have Hezbollah there in order to make sure that Israel and America never struck the nuclear reactors, or if they did.
I think what he's making a mistake here is that Obama or America are delusional. I think it's more of the fact that they have conflicting interest. I think that Barack Hussein Obama, is Muslim, and I do think that he has a certain affection toward his Muslim brothers and sisters. That's A. And I think that the Democratic Party wants to destroy America and destroy Western values. So when they say that they're delusional, I think they're very focused on their goal, and they're not totally misconstrued on what Iran's message is, but they might actually agree with a lot of what Iran says.
All 160,000.
Now you can argue that they're pro-Israel. The only reason they're pro-Israel is because it's so against the grain to be anti-Israel that there would be a lot of consequences for it. They'd lose a lot of votes. There's a lot of problems, and most of America still supports Israel.
Missiles would start being pointed at Tel Aviv, would be fired at Tel Aviv and Haifa. That has been taken away from them now. But this delusion that the revolutionary Islamic government can be brought into the fold is what many people, John Kerry, Jack Straw, these people all thought this was the case. They've been proven wrong again and again. And in recent days and weeks, we've had the spectacle of people who have never had to see a war, let alone fight one, saying all the time that Israel has to go for a ceasefire. They were flat out wrong.
Well,
Kamala Harris said, don't go into Rafah. Rafah was the stronghold of Hamas in Gaza. The IDF went into Rafah. They got a lot more of the senior leadership of Hamas, as we knew they would. They got some more hostages back. But Kamala Harris said she looked at the maps and she knew better.
So that's Douglas Murray. I think that last point about Kamala Harris is 100% right. She studied the maps, as he said, and she thought she knew better. Going into Rafah was definitely a great idea. They should have done it way before and not pandered to her administration. For more, subscribe to the channel. And if you want to help us make more of these videos, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/JewishUncensored.